So this one is about dealing with corrupted data. When in this case, the issue is that you have a raw data model where you made some assumptions or based on observations from the data sets you received, right? So you selected the business keys for your hubs, you have some satellite splits and so on. So you got your target model. But we all know, for example, for a business key must be unique, uniquely identify one row only in the source system. That's the basic idea. Customer numbers and so on, right? At least in the standard design, standard hub, standard satellite, etc. There's other scenarios. But let's say you assume a standard scenario, and in this case, the business key must be unique. Uniquely identify only one business object or representative of this business object in the source system, one customer and so on. And now all of a sudden you receive a delivery with multiple rows having the same business key, completely unexpected, right? So what do we do? Or other corrupted cases where maybe the data is not following the format you would expect and so on. And now with the answer, I typically struggle now because I want to achieve, on one hand, a fluent loading process where we don't have to intervene, or at least not by default. And then I would like to have a process which is fully auditable. So I can't just drop files and ignore them because I don't like them or something, right? That's an issue. So in this case, we would do this. So, and I have my fully auditable hat on me now. I wear that. So I would like to have a fully auditable solution. In this case, we have to be able to reconstruct every delivery that was delivered from the source system, one-to-one, without losing data, without artificially generating any data. That's a challenge now. In the best case, this comes from the raw data vault, but it doesn't have to. So typically in most modern scenarios, we have a data lake involved, and then the data lake becomes the source, a PSA, to the raw data vault. That's a typical design these days. So first of all, I would always capture data into the data lake. That's number one. But even there, I might run into issues when you have some query tools on top, let's say Athena or Impala or something, that you use for querying a data lake. These tools could also struggle with these files, right? So you might want to think about how to solve that using some metadata or something, where you would be able to skip some certain loads. So this data lake is your first step. That's where you capture the corrupted data set, and that's what you can use to reconstruct the delivery and essentially skip that delivery of loading into the next layer, into the raw data vault. And this skip, I would essentially define by some metrics, or some checks. So you would have some checks like, is a column which I selected for the business key in my target model, is it unique in the data set? Or is, let's say, all the data length or like data types, is that what it would expect? Or is there something longer, for example? So you have some checks on the incoming files where you make a decision to either accept the file in full or reject the file in full. That's the best design. If you just completely reject it because it's out of expectation, or you accept the file, but not single records in the best case. Now, so there's some checks, and when you reject the file, you inform the source delivery, the source system owner or the sender essentially to check the file and resend it essentially, which gives you a second load, right? So you can't replace the first corrupted load with the next corrected load or something. You have two loads now, two loads in a data lake. And only one is pushed downstream, essentially. That's the basic idea. So that's the typical design that we follow. Now, if you don't have a data lake, let's say we have a transient relational staging area in the raw data vault, you can still reject the file, the load from the incoming load, and those rejected loads I would capture somewhere, even though let's say in an extreme case where you don't capture all the deliveries because they ended up in a raw data vault anyway, right? So why would you store all these files somewhere else? If that's your scenario, I would still capture or keep those rejected deliveries so I can prove them. That's all I need. And sure, you need the log files where I'm logging which deliveries have been accepted, which have been rejected, what was the check that failed. So you want to also make sure these checks, you can reconstruct which checks have been applied. But the most important one is the one that failed, or that failed the load, essentially, right? So you want to keep track of those and also have them under these checks under version control, so you can prove for a certain day or actually delivery what checks have been applied, what was the version of the check, which failed, essentially. What was the reason why we rejected this delivery? And then you keep the delivery to prove it. right? You can't just skip the delivery and then just dump it. That's not going to work. We have to keep it essentially, because it's not ending up in a raw data vault. You could do this on a per row basis as well, rejecting single rows, but then, yeah, I mean, yeah, you can reject them, inform the data source owner, and it's not in the expected case, but you have to keep the rejected rows as well, because you have to prove the full delivery. All the rows you accepted, and including all the rows that you rejected. That's the full delivery. So that's what you have to be able to reconstruct. That's the important piece, right? All right. So now the next problem is, what if the definition of the source changed? So they can't fix this problem with multiple rows having the same business key, right? So you go back, you reject the load because it violates one of the checks. Is the business key column for my hub, is that unique in the source? No, it's not, so we reject the file. You inform the data source owner, they come back to you and say, well, yeah, they changed it, or that's maybe, that's by definition the way. We just made bad analysis or incomplete analysis when we designed the hub essentially. So it's what it is, that's what you get. So you can't change that, right? And then that's a refactoring, because all the tricks I hear sometimes, they wouldn't work. So you have to change your business key, because otherwise you risk duplicates in your hub, and it violates the most important requirement that the business key must uniquely identify a single business object essentially, or record. And that's what you're violating. So you have to fix that. There might be some changes around a record source tracking satellite that you could that you could use as a intermediate quick solution, let's say, but it's not a full solution for forever, because it's very expensive. You have to maintain the record source tracking satellite, keep it up to date, and it consumes a lot of storage essentially. So if the business key has changed for whatever reason, because the analysis changed or the data changed, the structure of the data changed, in that case, you have to refactor your solution, modify the hub. And modifying a hub, extending the business key columns by another column, let's say, it's the most simple change, or going for a different business key. Changing business keys in a raw data vault is the biggest change actually, because changing hubs in structure means you're also modifying or you have to review and modify the links referring to the hubs and the satellites both on the hubs and on those links referring to the hubs. So this change will impact a good portion of your model. However, there's a limit. It will not escalate all the way through the whole model or something, because it goes back and forth or something like in a 3NF enterprise model or something. No, the impact is really only the hub, its satellites, the links referring to the hubs, and those satellites attached to those links. That's your impact. So it has a limited impact, but that's the biggest impact that you can see from a refactoring standpoint. All the other refactorings are typically much lower from an effort-wise. So that's the biggest ticket you have when refactoring a raw data vault, when the business key changes. But that's what it is, because think about this. We are modeling the raw data vault. We're modeling raw data as the business is using it. And that's a reference to the business key. So the business key is the central piece here of our model. And if the business key changes for whatever reason, it has the biggest impact on the data model. That's what it is. And you have to fix it. All the other fixes, all the ideas, they will not work. They will lead to duplicates in the loading mechanism. They will lead to other issues. And that's why you have to fix this business key, essentially, if it's not unique. That's the idea. It's bad news, I know, but again, it's limited impact, and that's what it is. All right. So those are my ideas or my thoughts, let's say, about those corrupted loads. There's some more topics which we train in the data vault training as well. How to deal with corrupted loads when descriptive data is affected, for example. There's some quick fix. As if it's just descriptive data, we can ingest the correction load in between or just after the bad data into the satellites, and then rebuild the pit tables. Problem solved. We teach this in our standard training essentially, so it's all there. Standard pattern, very easy to apply. It's just the initial load essentially with a backdated load date. And that's essentially that backdated load that you set just after the corrupted load, and then rebuilding the pit fixes the problem in the information delivery. So that's easy. The business keys here is a complicated issue, and how to deal with those deliveries, in my opinion. That's the biggest change essentially, typically. Okay, cool. Thank you for joining us today. Please subscribe and activate the notifications to stay ahead with real-time streaming, cloud-native patterns, and AI SML integration. Explore our upcoming Data Vault 2.1 trainings. To scan the QR code or check the link, Thank you. Bye, guys.